And welcome to our November presentation. It's not from notMYkid, and we're really looking forward to this. But first, as always, I want to remind everybody that we are recording now. So if you are visiting with us online today, now is your opportunity to turn off your camera, or you will be part of our presentation going forward. Also, this presentation is intended for our parents. And if you are logging in to see the presentation, please remember that the information being presented today is intended for parents of our students and to have the conversations with your kids. Okay, so I leave it now to our fabulous people from notMYkid.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having us. I'm so excited to be here. We planned this back in May, and I'm like, how is this November already? Does anyone feel that? Like, how are we here? And so we're so excited. We're going to introduce ourselves. My name's Allison Tobon, and I am a program coordinator here. And so I coordinate a lot of the services across the Valley, really working with our school districts, seeing what's happening within the schools, how can we support them, show up with our programming. We will go into like what we do, all the gist of that. I really show up here when I show up to do adult presentations as my high school self of like, wow, like I really wish my parents had something like this. And the fact that I get to give back and kind of give an overview of like teen mental health, youth mental health. And I know we all show up here. Some of us have students that are younger in those elementary school ages or in high school, wherever your student may fall. It's really important that we on the preventative side, or if we're in the thick of having a teenager. And so I have also worked with teenagers for across the board for so many long. And like I feel like I've just always been. I mainly work with middle schoolers. I've mentored them for a really long time. Anyone have a middle schooler in here? Yeah, they're like the chaos, but also they're my favorite. They're just, it's so fun that age. And I currently work with seniors, mentors. I mentor them, they're seniors in high school. And so that's what I do on the side apart from being a program coordinator, but I just like love the youth and empowering them. And so I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, so my name is Elena Zabalza. I am the Spanish programs manager here at notMYkid. This last year, we've had a lot of growth with the Spanish speaking community. So I just oversee any of the translation that happens so that we can make it culturally appropriate and make it understanding for these families. I do have about 10 years now of experience working with community mental health. I just have a passion of working with families, really educating the families, really going out into these communities and letting them know what's going on, what can create this connection between the parents and the children, whether they're very small. Infant mental health is where one of my passions is. I did do psychotherapy with families for quite a while. So infant mental health, how they can connect with them when they're that young. And now that I'm working with parents and adolescents and preteens, it's a very different world for me, but I'm learning so much. And there's just so much impact that we're doing out in the community now. All right, so here at notMYkid, we want to ensure that every kid thrives by inspiring positive life choices. So we want to make sure that we're not just coming out here and saying, hey, these are the facts, this is what's going on. We want to make that impact, right? We want to teach students, we want to teach parents, anybody in the community working with youth, we want to let them know, hey, this is how we can make that positive impact. These are the choices that we can make. These are the ways that we can make these choices and how we can really make an impact in that way. And then really educate to build resiliency, inspire hope for the future, grow connection and communication.
Great. So we go upstream for prevention. And so our model is really the preventative. We started in substance use prevention. And so what that looks like is we will go into schools as low as 5th grade and have presentations on substance use, teen mental health, internet safety, bullying. Those are our 4 main topics that we really dive into. We do that with our youth, and we also do it here as with our adults as well, anyone that works with youth. And so we really try to have those conversations. Hey, here are the choices you get to make. right? There are so many choices we get to make, and what are the, positive ones that we can, and what are the outcomes if we don't really make those good choices? And so we really try our best in our presentations with our youth to meet them where they're at, to have conversations. Every school is different, every youth is different. And so we really try to meet them where they're at, have those conversations to create that prevention, to really give them the information that they need.
All right, and then, we do take this trauma-informed approach, so we're always thinking about safety first, always making sure, there is some information that we share that's a little bit more difficult than typical. It's sensitive material. We always want to make sure that if you need space, take that space, right? If something that we're sharing resonates too much with you, you're like, you know what? This is too sensitive of a topic. I can't do this right now. Feel free to step out. Let us know, hey, I just can't be here right now. Whatever is best for you. And we do have resources available, right? We're always here to support. We're not just going to give you all this difficult information and say, have a good day, right? Because then that would be really mean of us. But we want to make sure that we're taking care of you as well. And always remember that what's said in here stays here, right? We want to make sure that we make this a safe space for anybody to want to share, to discuss anything that's going on. And we're going to be learning from each other, right? Everybody has a different experience. Everybody goes through things differently. We can all experience something here in this room, right in this moment. A very drastic situation can happen, but we're all going to have a different perspective on it because it all depends on our past, our childhood as well. So always keeping that in mind, being respectful of others in the room as well.
Awesome. And as we go into our objectives today, I feel like mental health in general, we could probably sit here. I could sit here and talk for like weeks on it because I love it and it's so great. But these are just some of the things that we are going to touch on. So we're going to touch on what's the difference between stress and anxiety, what that looks like in a youth's life, like what are some of the things that they may be stressed about, what are some of the things that maybe like their anxiety comes through, what is depression, what is the prevalence of depression in teens, what are the warning signs of suicide? And then lastly, like what are ways that we can support our youth? What are ways that we can show up appropriately? There's all these big things, and I think when we go and talk about anxiety, depression, and suicide, it feels really heavy. But we want to leave you guys with tools and learn from each other, just like Anna just said, of how can we show up for our youth and support them and some of the mental health challenges they may face or they are currently facing.
And we have this wonderful citation page. I know I look smart, but I did not make up the slide from everything in my brain. We did the research, we did the work, so that you guys don't have to do it, right? We want to make sure that we find all the correct information. Everything that we're sharing is stuff that we found from reliable sources. So, we see the CDC up here. We have Harvard University Medical School. We have some very well-known sources that we use to make sure that we can provide you guys with the most updated information.
Awesome. So as we go into what is stress, so this is how we define it. Stress is a mental or emotional strain or tension resulting in unprecedented or very demanding circumstances. So how we like to explain it is this external source of stress. So some of the examples would be like if you're going to go into a job interview, right? Before then, you're going to be super stressed, like, oh, I don't know where it's going to be, what the person that's interviewing me like, that may be really stressful. But then you have your interview, and you're like, oh, okay, I did it. Like I did the interview, I feel pretty good. Or if we take our youth, right, they may be feeling really stressed about a test they need to take. For me, it was always my algebra. I still have a recurring dream of algebra 2, Miss Raymond's class. That was like, I always have it because I'm just not the math person. That's why I chose psychology. And right, I would go in, I'd be super stressed about it. I'd take that, okay, I did it. And you may see that in some of your youth too, up there, like really worked up about a subject, going into that. That's really common, right? It's this external force that is causing them their stress.
And when we think about stress, we have two different types of stress, right? We have youth stress and distress. Youth stress is something positive, right? Allison did bring up going into an interview, but now you got this job, right? Anybody get the jitters when they start a new job? Yeah, so we have those jitters, right? Like, ooh, like what's this going to be? I have a new job, I'm gonna have a new boss, are the people gonna like me there? Or maybe I got a promotion, like, dang, I got selected. What are my coworkers gonna think? Is this gonna be a bad thing, a good thing? Are they gonna be happy for me? It's that type of positive stress. Buying a home is stressful, right? But once you get that house, you move in, you're like decorating it how you want, like that turns into something positive. We have some stuff that's distress, maybe divorce, loss of something, an injury that has left you unable to do what you're able to do, but what you typically do on your day-to-day basis, maybe a relationship conflict. These are things that are going on, and we think of these things as they're happening to us, but now we look at it through a teenager, right? Something as simple as, my best friend doesn't want to be my best friend anymore. That's a stressful situation. Like, what did I do? Why did this change happen? Or maybe even like, I studied for this test and I still failed it. Like, what's going on here? Like, what did I do wrong? These are things that they're thinking about that cause them stress. And sometimes we think, oh, they're grumpy. Oh, what's up with that attitude? I have a 16-year-old sister that partially lives with me. And I say that jokingly because she's just, my mom's always like, come get your sister. But this girl is always worrying about things that in my head I'm thinking, that's important, but okay, let's validate your feelings, right? But they have stress that we don't think is stressful.
And so we have like a big long list of things that possibly can be stressful. One of the like biggest things that when I was in the classroom before this, I was the specialist. So I would go into and hang out with our high schoolers and we would do like a life skills training that was 2 weeks long. And one of the lessons that we would do would be on stress and managing stress. What are some positive ways that you can cope? And we would do this activity that was completely anonymous, and I would pass out a sticky note and I would be like, don't put your name on it. We're going to read this anonymously, like mix it up. What's the number one thing that stresses you out? And we would do this, I think, like over, I would see like 200 students in a day just coming through, and all of it would pop up, and it would be school. And school was very, very stressful to a lot of them. There would be some outliers, but majority, it would be worrying about school in the future and what that looks like, especially juniors and seniors as they're stepping into this next season of life, right? That can be very stressful. My seniors right now are like, oh my goodness, college applications feel really overwhelming. FAFSA, they're like, what even is that? How do I do that? And that's really overwhelming and can be really stressful. And then social media. We all know that social media, they're very connected, can be a very good thing, but also can be very harmful. And especially as I talk to some of our girls on social media, the like beauty standard or how they feel they should look can be very stressful, especially what they're posting, what they're wearing, kind of chasing after this unrealistic idea of what beauty is or what they should dress like, right? I always try to say like, hey, this is someone's highlight reel, right? This is not real life in that. For parental pressure and peer pressure, right? As a child, I really struggled with anxiety. In my freshman year, I kind of had this like unraveling of events because I put a lot of pressure, but I had this like false notion that my parents were like, you have to do everything my sister did because my sister was way better in school than I was. She did sports, she did all those things, and I just was a different child than she was. And I looked at my sister and I was like, oh, my parents want me to be that way. And I kind of got to a point where I was like, oh, I kind of like came undone, and my mom sat me down and just like, hey, like, I don't expect you to be this certain way, and really like release my own pressure that I put on myself that I thought my parents were putting on me. I just needed them to verbally tell me like, hey, no, like you are doing really great, and you and your sister are very, very different individuals. And then just some other things like we'll go into how stress affects the body. The COVID-19 response. COVID was really stressful for all of us. I think that our seniors were in 8th grade when it happened. The math, I feel like we're all like, what year is it, you know? And that's just stressful. And I think just learning some of the things that they lost within COVID, right? Not being in school, the socialization, the academic side, that can be really stressful, kind of trying to catch up as well. The fear of missing out, right? I feel stressed about this as well. I think that's a very normal thing. But especially that social media, right? If their friends are posting, and they can't be somewhere, whatever that may be, that can also cause a lot of stress. And so I won't go through every single one, but there's a long list. I feel like we could go on and on about that.
Now, when we think about, we just discussed stress, but now thinking about what is anxiety, right? So feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. This is the fear of the unknown. This is an internal source, right? And many times our own internal self is telling us, like, what about this? What about that? And we start going off on this tangent of like a whole imaginary world, right? I know that when I was younger, my parents were never able to go out on a date until I was like 14. They tried to do it a few times. I was like 4 or 5, and they would drop me off at my aunt's house. My aunt would be calling me all week, like, hey, babe, we're going to be coming over. We're going to eat snacks all night and watch movies all night. You can stay up as late as you want. I'm going to take you here. We're going to do this. We're going to just whatever toppings you want on the pizza. It was very convincing. But the moment my parents left, 30 minutes later, I'm like, are they almost here? Are they picking me up yet? What time are they coming? Are they okay? Can you call them? And probably like 30 minutes in, they would start calling my parents and saying, she's not okay. Because I had this fear that if my parents drove away without me, they were going to turn the corner and get hit by a car, and the ambulance wasn't going to get there in time. I was like floored, having this huge imagination with anxiety. And I know that that's an example of me being really young, but even with our adolescents, right? They're going through this. They're having this internal force tell them, hey, it's not going to be okay. And then they're in this imaginary world, imaginary scenario that might happen, but most likely won't happen.
So the behaviors of anxiety, this, I like to say, like, we all know the baseline. Like, it's really important that every single one of us, like, knows the baseline of our youth and, like, what their normal is, because every child is different. So just keeping that in mind. But some of the behaviors is that worry, like excessive worry about future events. So if it's just, like, impacting their daily life of maybe being just like constantly worked up about something in the future or something that may happen in the future. Just like her example of like, oh, I don't know what is going to happen to my parents when they leave. I had that very much in high school. When I would go to school, I would have a panic attack because I was so afraid that if something happened to me, my parents couldn't get to me, or I couldn't get to them if something happened. And it was impacting my schooling. I was out of school for a lot of the time, so I just get really worked up about that. This expectations to be perfect, right? This expectation that I have to do everything right, and if I, mess up a little bit or fail, that something's going to happen, or they, internally like punish themselves. So just being aware of that, of like, even just being like, hey, it's okay if we fail. We're all gonna fail. We're all gonna, mess up. I know some students that I talk to, they're like, got a bad grade on my test, and I'm like, well, what was the grade? They're like, oh, it was a B, and I was like, a B? Like, that's so great. Like, that's like, you should be so proud of yourself for that, right? And so having those, just like this expectation that they put on themselves. The repetitive thoughts patterns that we talk about, failure to be assertive, right? So the failure to like put those boundaries down too. I feel like with the perfect thing of like saying yes to everything and not really paying attention to like, I was constantly like running in high school and like trying to say yes to everything. I would forget to eat. I wouldn't sleep a lot because I was just doing all of these things. And that was because I had this like anxiety that if I wasn't doing enough, I wasn't okay. I wasn't viewed by my parents as being good. And so I think it's important, like embodying habit, teaching them to set and maintain those healthy boundaries to take care of themselves. And we'll talk about this at the end of the presentations, but also us as we interact with the youth, it's really important that we are modeling that behavior, because as much as we think that they're not watching us or they're not watching the behaviors, or because they're telling us like, I don't want to talk to you, they really do watch and they really do model what they're doing. I think about when I was in high school, my mom, I would like, there's the classic, and I would be like, how was school? And I was like, oh, I'm gonna like run upstairs. And she didn't do anything wrong, but she continued to be interested in my life. And she would really model having those like healthy communication with me and trying to open it up, even though I have apologized to her now. Like, I'm so sorry that you literally like looked at me and I was like, don't look at me. No. So those are some of those things. And it also comes up in different ways, right? Even those like panic attacks, that you can see lack of sleep. We'll go into the more of the what anxiety does to our body a little bit later.
So when we think about feeling anxious and having anxiety, it's something very different. So is the anxiety out of proportion to the situation, or is it age appropriate, right? Is this child just very worried about something that is out of their control, right? Let's say we have a 6-year-old, they are constantly seeing their parents fight. Parents are bickering back and forth. They're feeling anxious of leaving the house because what if when I leave, my parents start fighting? They've been fighting a lot. They've been yelling at each other. What if when I leave? What if I'm not there and my absence is what's causing this, right? It's something that happened a few times. Now they're very worried about it. Now they're continuously thinking about this. And then we have having anxiety, right? Is it impairing the ability to function normally? There are people who can't even step out of their own house. There are some people who can't even step out of their own room without being scared that something is happening. And these examples that I'm giving are a little bit more drastic, right? There are people, like the example of people not being able to leave their house. But there are people who are continuously thinking of things that are happening around them that aren't really happening, right? It's that imagination land that we're going to where, oh my goodness, my parents are going to leave and they're going to get hit, and then the ambulance can't come and they're not going to be saved, and I'm not going to have parents, right? That's a little example, but as adults, sometimes we do stop ourselves and really block ourselves from going a little bit further, or even adolescents, right? How Allison shared, there was times when she was missing out on school. She was missing out on school because she felt like she couldn't get to her parents, or her parents couldn't get to her if there was an emergency. So there is a difference between feeling anxious and having that anxiety.
So effects of stress and anxiety on our body. So this is one of my favorite slides because I feel that youth, especially if we take like our elementary school kids, right, they may not have the ability to be like, hey mom, I'm really anxious today, or I'm really stressed out. They may not have those words to communicate. And even some of our adolescents in high school, like they don't know how to communicate. They may be like, I don't know how to like tell a safe adult this. But one of the things that we can look at is what just some of their behaviors. So some of the things that I like is to do is with the sleep and where they're sleeping, right? If they're sleeping excessively or not enough. My mom knew that if I couldn't fall asleep or I didn't have a good night of sleep, she knew that I was stressed. She knew that I was just so worked up in my brain that I couldn't turn it off, and I couldn't be able to just like fall asleep and relax, right? Even the excessive sleep, right? They're just sleeping way too much. It's normal for teenagers to sleep a long time, but just that excessive sleep is important. One of the things that happened to me when I was a kid is I always had stomach aches. My parents got divorced when I was 5. It was really just like I was house to house. It was really like traumatizing for me as a child, and I had these really bad stomach aches. And my mom and my dad were like, oh, it's probably dairy. Like, you know, dairy hurt my stomach, like in general, and it was. But it wasn't later until I found out that it was actually my body telling me, hey, you're really stressed out. You're not regulating, because your body releases cortisol and to like tell you like, hey, something's up. I couldn't verbally say it. So I think it's important to be aware of those things if it's like chronic stomach aches or those chronic things, to just dive a little bit deeper into it. Utilize your school nurses, right? Be in contact with them if your child is going up there a lot because they're really tired, their stomach's hurting, whatever that may be. They will be able to help like indicate maybe some of those things that you're not seeing because you're not with them in the classroom all the time. or in those things. And so making sure that you utilizes the resources that your school gives you, and being just know who to call, know who to, just to check in on those things. And so there's a lot of different things that, and I feel like some of us feel like, oh yeah, I feel that when I'm stressed as well, right? The lack of focus, the muscle pain or tension, right? I know a lot of people like will grab right here. I lock my knees. And so if I had a really stressful day and I like go to bed and my knees are hurting, I'm like, oh, I must be stressed because I just like lock and clench the whole time. I kind of talked about the digestive system, and so there's a lot of different things, but I think utilizing the school nurses, just being aware of those things if your child can't necessarily communicate that to you, is important.
Now we're going to talk about depression. So what is depression? Depression is a complex behavioral health issue that varies from person to person and lasts for a prolonged period of time. Similar to how we've commented before, everybody's experiences are going to lead them to process certain situations a different way, right? And it can lead to depression. So these complex behaviors really do happen as we're growing up. Every experience that we've had from birth until where we are now, they've affected how we plan, how we decide, the choices that we make. So when you think about depression, we're going to go a little bit more into detail about what it means. But as we go through the definition, just thinking about though everybody's going to experience it differently. There we go.
So some warning signs, these do overlap with anxiety. Like I will say this over again, you guys know your baseline, you know, of your child. But some of the things just to highlight is the feeling of worthlessness or hopelessness, like this very deep, like there's no hope. They can't plan for the future. They don't see a future. They're like, it's not important to do that. It could be a warning sign of like, okay, let's talk a little bit more about why you're not excited for even the simple things of like Christmas or a vacation that's coming up. Just really digging into those. The loss of energy and fatigue, being really low energy, the sleeping a long period of time. That's one of the things to look like. Another thing that is if they're like giving away their items. So if they're giving away their Xbox or things that they treasure, that's a warning sign to be pay attention to. If they're bringing things to you, bringing things to their friends, because they may have made a decision on something or whatever that may be. And so just being aware of the change of appetite as well. If they're eating a lot or they're not eating a lot, or the differences between the two. So being aware of those things, the restlessness, and then the reoccurring thoughts of death and suicide. And that's the one of when I was talking about like giving away things, that should be like a really red flag of like, hey, we need to have a conversation. I need to get you support, whatever that may be, is important. And these do overlap with the anxiety as well.
And these are just some things to keep in mind. If depression is often treated, it can get worse and worse over time, right? It creates additional challenges. And if there's no support, there might be no turning back. 20% of adolescents experience depression before they reach adulthood. When we think about 20%, that's 2 out of 10. And we have these students taking that into the adulthood. And once they become adults, it becomes a little bit more risky. Teenage boys are less likely to be willing to report depression. We see that same statistic in men and older men, right? They're the ones that are least likely to report it, and they are the ones that have the most successful attempts at committing suicide. And then depression does not discriminate. Depression does not care if you have money, you don't have money, you live with both parents, you live with just one parent, you live with your grandparents, you're an only child, you have siblings. It doesn't matter what ethnic background you have. Depression is not going to discriminate.
So some unhealthy coping skills, right? If they're feeling this hopelessness, if they're in the depression episode, what are some of the things that they may be trying to cope with this to make themselves feel better? The self-injury, some of the warning signs for self-injury is, I know it's hard now that like, I feel like all the youth are wearing like big baggy clothes and stuff, but they're like trying to hide their forearms, looking for those scars. If they are injuring themselves, just being aware of maybe they start wearing like hoodies more than they used to, that could be a warning sign of that. I already talked about sleep, bullying, on both sides. They're either trying to gain power over something. Bullying is the power. So if they're bullying someone, they're trying to gain power, trying to maybe read what's happening inside. They don't know what to do and they feel like they don't have power inside to change that. And so they're trying to gain that. The unhealthy relationships, maybe their friendships are just, being unhealthy. And they're seeking maybe like a codependent relationship with another person. Being just aware of like the community that they're surrounding with them. Maybe they're surrounding themselves with other friends who are also being like, it's cool that you're down, or it's cool that you're feeling this way, and like really, I don't want to say highlighting these feelings of being depressed, right? And then there's a lot of other ones that we have, but I'll end on substance use, right? Substance use, they're feeling a certain way. Well, if I take something, I'm gonna feel better, or I won't feel these feelings anymore. And then we'll go a little bit more into this on the next slide.
Yeah, so when we're thinking of these unhealthy coping skills, substance use is something that we see a lot. And I want to ask you all this question: what percentage of teens using drugs attributed their drug use to coping with stress? What do you guys think is the number? What percentage? 50? 70? What was it back there? Greater than 70? That's correct. 73% of teens attributed their drug use to coping with stress. So now on the reverse side, on the flip side, what percentage of parents thought that their students were using substance use to cope with their stress?
Less than 10.
Less than 10. It's about 7%. That parents say, yeah, my student would not be using substances, and only 7% of parents said, yeah, my student is doing it.
So suicide, I want to take a moment before I dive into it that some of us may have been affected by it. I recently lost my cousin, and so I just want to acknowledge that. That's hard and it's heavy, and I carry him with me all the time when I talk about this as well. So just some of the statistics: the second leading cause of death among 10 to 34-year-olds in the United States is suicide. They're 2 times more likely than homicides, and then it increased among 10 to 24-year-olds from 2007 to 2008. We do have to update years of that as well. But what we do know is that it is prevalent, and I think it's important too, when we see these warning signs and these red flags of our child, is to ask the question, hey, are you thinking about killing yourself? And I know that's hard, and I've been in situations with loved ones where I've had to ask that question, and who wants to ask that question? Who wants to be in that space? But it's important if we ask directly and frank, so we are able to get them the help they need. A great resource just to have, we'll have this at the end, is 988, and that is a suicide hotline, and you can call that, you can text it, and even if you're like, hey, I'm unsure, I don't really know what to do, they'll walk you through it. They may be like, yes, let's send a crisis team out there, or hey, actually, let's send you to my 24/7. That is also another great resource to go and get help right away. All of these hotlines, you can call them if you're just like unsure, and they'll walk you through that. And I think that's just important to have in our pockets, not only with our youth, but with the people around us as well. And so just asking those questions and being upfront. I know it's hard and I know it's heavy, but it's important to ask those questions.
And when I think of all of these warning signs, right? So for suicide, this is one of the harder topics to talk about, even for us. I did lose someone about 7 years ago. I was the last person to talk to them before they took their life. And in that moment, you don't think about this type of stuff, but afterwards you replay a lot of conversations. I know that this is what has happened to me. You replay a lot of conversations, a lot of situations, a lot of things I saw posted on their Facebook wall, and you start to think, dang, those warning signs were there, and I kind of just brushed it off, right? So we have some things like changing their sleeping pattern, the isolation. The isolation was a big one for me with my friend when he took his life. Those extreme mood swings, that was a big one. change in eating habits. So many times we just think, oh, they're being a teenager. They just don't want to eat. They're just being a brat. We have so many things that we put up front. But when we have many of these warning signs combined, it's always important to think of that question like, do I need to step in? Do I need to ask this hard question about what are their intentions with what they're doing? Are they self-sabotaging? The liking posts or following accounts that promote negative behaviors. So I do like to share this because this was one of the last things that my friend posted, and it was a guy sitting in a chair and everybody around him is having a good time, and it says, my mood lately, wishing I wasn't here. And that was maybe about a week before he took his life. So these are little warning signs, and I'll let Allison add some more just because she does have an experience too, and I want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, so with the posting one of the things that I like to share just as a tool, there is a awesome tool app called Bark. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this, but Bark is basically you can link this app to your child's phone. And what it does is it's monitoring things that go back and forth. But what you do is you can add like, okay, I want to add suicide. I want to add give it, different things like plans or whatever that may be. So if your child does like text a friend saying something, or they receive a message about one of their friends having these feelings or whatever, it will alert you. So then okay, I need to step in and I need to have this conversation. And so Bark's like an incredible tool to use. I think it's just bark.usa. You can look it online, look up just Bark, and it's on there. And they also have a lot of blog posts on there just about internet safety in general. But what we do know, we run this training, teen mental health first aid, and what we do is we train our sophomores to seniors how to be that, how do we connect them to an older adult when a child is facing, their friends are facing a mental health challenge, because we know that more than likely they're going to tell their friends first before they ever go to an adult. And so how do we train our youth to go bring them to a trusted adult, to if they have a trusted adult, or to their personal trusted adult? It's such a beautiful program because it's empowering our youth to like stand up for their friends, but also I think they're like, I don't know what to do when my friend gives me this information. And I know that I've talked to other districts where some students feel bad for sharing because they're like telling on their friend, but really being like, that's not the case. You're saving someone's life. And we talk about this in our teen mental health presentation as well, of how do we stand up for our friends, even if it's like breaking that trust because it's their life. And so that's the one thing that like I really want to highlight with that, with the warning signs, is just the tool that you guys can use that can be accessible.
So now we've covered stress, anxiety, depression, and even covered suicide. And before we get on this, I want to make sure that everyone's okay. Shake the wiggle, stand up and do a little wiggle, do a little dance, do something. I know, but this is hard information to hear. And more when we're thinking about our teenagers or our young children. I worked at schools, and I had a student as young as second grade, and this was about maybe like 8 years ago. She was in second grade, and we had her on watch because she had attempted suicide twice at home. So when we say that this does not discriminate, it's always keeping in mind like everything that we've talked about today, right? And it's not to alarm you, it's more just so that we're aware, right? We're aware of what risks are out there, what's going on, and we know that students are exposed to so much more. So now we do want to bring up these 7 supporting tips for your teen, right? So number 1, we start talking to them and listen. And this is a very important one because there is no age limit, right? There are so many things we can talk to them about when they're younger and make it age appropriate. I know that I've had this conversation with my mom recently, and it's been an ongoing conversation. There were so many times that she tried to protect me from things by not talking to me about them. She would say, you're too young to know about this. You shouldn't be talking about this. This isn't something that you should be talking about. But my friends knew about it. My friends were the ones that were feeding me this information, but my mom wasn't giving me the correct information. So I had this idea of certain topics that was a little bit more drastic than it was. So it's always taking that time to talk to them, no matter what age they are. Give them something age appropriate, and most importantly, listen. Listen to what they have to say. It could be something super silly. And I say this because of my 16-year-old sister, right? There are some things that I'm like, really? Like, this is what we're gonna talk about? But I give her that space because it helps her to kind of like unravel that knot that she has in her brain in that moment to kind of really identify what she needs to do.
Yeah. The next one is help them identify what they are feeling. Sometimes when we have these conversations, they're like, I'm fine. And you're like, okay, well, that doesn't give me anything. And one of the things that I actually like use in my home with my husband, because sometimes I'm like, I don't even know how I'm feeling, is an emotion wheel. And so you could just like look this up on Google and go to their images. And what it does is it takes just like, I'm feeling happy. And then it breaks it down into more like, okay, I'm feeling of the other, I'm losing my adjectives of happy. And it really breaks down to like, okay, this is actually how I'm feeling, right? Because we could feel so many different things and happy. We can feel so many things and sadness, all of those things. And so that's a tool, especially with our younger students, to be able to like have that poster on the fridge and be like, how are you feeling today? And just practice as well. To really understand, to teach them those skills as well, because I didn't really have that a lot growing up. Like we had really good conversations, but my mom never really taught me like emotions, like different emotions and what that looks like. And so as an adult, I've had to like bring myself to the emotion wheel and be like, okay, like this is what I feel of those things. Also going just back up to the communication, I was reading an article about someone was talking about what her mom did as a child, and what her mom did is they called it window time. They didn't really have a reason why they called it window time, but she every day would, before bed, take 15 minutes and just talk to, like their mom would allow space for them just to talk one-on-one, and it was consistent. It was really busy, and you guys all live a lot of busy lives. There's like sports, there's careers, there's a lot of things, but she was super consistent about creating that space where she knew as a child, like my mom's gonna have space for me today. It's just gonna be at this time. And that was a really beneficial tool. And so I took that and I was like, wow, like with the like everything in life, being able to create a consistent time, if it's driving to school, and it doesn't have to be like these deep conversations, but just a space of like, I know I'm gonna get this undivided attention. It's really important and can help build that communication to when there may be an issue, they will know, hey, I will have a safe place as well.
And number 3, protecting their body through proper sleep, exercise, and nutrition. You guys saw the effects that, anxiety, stress, and depression had on the body. When we're not taking care of our body, when we're not taking care of, our movement, that really does affect our brain as well, right? Making sure that there is that movement. Have a family walk after dinner. Maybe I know that there's, busy lives. There's so many things going on. There's sports, there's dance, there's gymnastics, there's everything on the list, right? And then there's things that we want to do as well. But even taking a quick walk around the block, going down the street and back, maybe even having a quick race, like let's say who can go to the corner and back, something that'll get them moving. And I am going to go back up to number 2 as well. One of the things that I like to tell families, ever since this movie came out, is think about the movie Inside Out, right? And it sounds silly, but it's really cute. Even my husband has gotten into the habit of this. If I'm like a little upset, he's like, are you feeling disgusted or are you angry right now? Like, which one are you? Like, he's even using the characters to describe, like, do you feel like anger during this scene? And it's always nice to have like a family movie night too, and even say, okay, like these are the core feelings. Let's talk about it. And now there's a new movie coming out, right? And it's going to talk about like that anxiety, depression, and all of that. So it'll even expand that conversation that can be had with our students.
I love that. It's a great tool to have. Encourage self-care practices and mindful techniques, especially us like taking care of ourselves. What does that look like? For me, it's I need to take a walk. I'm like, I need to go walk, no one talked to me. I drive in the car with no music. People think that's crazy. My husband's like, why would you do that? But to me, I'm like, I just want to just to breathe and to have those moments. Also journaling is another one. And then the box breathing as well, right? If you are in a stressful situation, I think about airports and bringing a bunch of kids to airports. I just was on a trip and I was like, oh my gosh, when I have kids, I can't imagine if I can barely get myself through security. I don't even know. But to be like, okay, they see oh, this feels really stressful. You taking a moment and taking a breath, re-regulating yourself so they can model that and regulate with you. Being mindful of maybe when you are getting worked up to be able to, okay, maybe I need to pause, regulate so they can regulate too. So they can see how you handle those stressful situations. Because one day when they're adults, they're going to be going through the airport with their kids and they're going to be like, oh my goodness, this is stressful. But my mom took a moment and took a breath always. Yeah.
And then going on to number 5, help them discover their purpose and strength. This is, as parents, as caregivers, as people who are around students, we know what they're good at, right? We can point out and say, ooh, they are really good at this. Taking that and really helping them grow from there. Sometimes we ask the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know. I want to be a unicorn. I don't know. They come up with the cutest things. But asking them what do you want to be? I don't know. Oh, well, you're really good at this. Do you like that? And asking those questions to really help them figure that out. Because if we're helping them discover who they are, and it's not just about what career do you want to be, right? And I have to get out of that habit, but what do they aspire to be when they grow up? What do they want to be doing? Do they want to travel? Do they want to have a family? Do they want to do all these great things? What are those big things that they want to put on their list so that they can accomplish them and get there with those skills that we can see and we can identify?
And the next one, model healthy behaviors and thinking. This kind of all ties into each other, right? Our youth are going to watch us and how we talk to ourselves, the way that we make comments, the way that we think about even the outlook of life as well. And so modeling those positive thinking patterns and behaviors. I know that it's sometimes really hard to do that or to be aware of those, but it's important. And the discovering being, I think the coolest part about and why I love working with you so much is that we get to watch them develop and discover all of their strengths that are unique to themselves. And we get to be a part of that and a part of building the resiliency of them and building these protective factors around them and helping them if they do face mental health challenges, that we can help them say, hey, there is hope and there is things that we can do to provide. I'm sorry, I totally took your last one over to connecting them with professional care, right? And so being able to know what's out in the community, we will have our services, just another slide that is a resource to you. And if we don't have something for you, we will definitely connect you with a provider that's near you for professional care.
And these are really important because many times a minor disagreement happens with a friend or even with a parent, and teenagers do think their life is over, right? Maybe we think we have to be perfect, or going back to that whole thought about social media, right? What we see online is not always the truth. So youth do need to know that there is hope, right? They're not alone. We've all experienced similar things. Feeling down, angry, and stressed is a normal part of life. Who in here has never experienced anger or stress? Because I want to hang out with you. I want to know what you're doing. What is the secret? Because we gotta write a book and become rich and just get it out there. But not everything on social media is as it seems. That's one of the things that I touched base on at the beginning, right? So many times we're focused on what other people are doing, or even that concept of FOMO, right? Fear of missing out because other people are posting. I'm guilty of this because sometimes I save my pictures from vacation and it'll just be a random weekend where I'm eating hot Cheetos on the couch, right? I'm just munching on these chips and I'm like, yeah, let's pretend I'm at the beach right now. It's been 5 years since I've done it, so don't judge me. But knowing that good mental health means experiencing negative emotions and positive emotions. It comes, right? Positive and negative happen. We just have to figure out how to overcome that and cope with it. And then coping with life stressors is harder for some than others. This is something we touched at the beginning, right? Everybody's experiences are a little bit different. So how we deal with them is going to be a little bit different as well. And coping skills are not a one size fit all, right? I'm gonna try different ones. You're gonna find the one that fits you best. Breathing might work for me, but it might not work for you, or vice versa. Me getting up and dancing is something that you're like, I would never do that, right? But it's what I do. Going on a hike, going and watching a movie, getting our nails done, getting our hair done. These are little things that we can do to kind of remove us from a stressful situation or a negative situation.
So here we have like a really long list of coping skills that we can do, that I like to participate, but also that we can share with our youth of what are some things, what are some of the habits that we can build maybe within the family that like, hey, we're gonna do this together. We're gonna go on a walk after dinner, or we are going to go on a hike every Saturday, whatever that may be, whatever fits for you and your youth as well. There are so many different things. Right, exercise and sports, right? That may be some of our youth, like they're like, yeah, like let's get in sports and I love sports because a lot of it is also the community based, that they get to interact with other peers, and then they also have a coach, right? An older trusted adult that they can go to, another one in their system as well. And then some sports may not be someone's thing, into the creativity side, right? Leaning into music, right? Music classes, or even letting them like paint and draw, and just supplying them with like whatever they need to be creative and what that looks like. Being able to do that together, I think finding what coping skills really work is really an exciting thing, because you guys can partner together and go, okay, well, what's exciting for you? My cousin recently, she is a freshman in high school, and she just had just a really hard year and just a really hard start to the year. And me and my sister came over and we're like, okay, we're gonna try like every activity, and ones you don't like, we're not gonna do the ones that you do, but we're gonna do it together. And being able to figure out what she really likes, and like her showing us things that we like. My sister is a equine therapist, and so what she does is she does therapy with horses, and she brought my cousin to like go see horses. She's like, I do not want to be around these horses, but she likes fashion and painting and the creative side of things, which was great. And we're like, cool, you don't like that? Like, let's try something else. And so being able to have fun with it as well, and doing it together.
Are there any on here that you guys, you know, with the kiddos that you guys are around, anything that they might do that's not on this list? I always like to look to know, because some people have some fun ones.
Speaking of that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Anything else? Okay.
Awesome. So here is some of the services that we provide. We have a 3-tiered like model that we go off of. And so the first tier is the prevention. So kind of this baseline, the prevention education, what we're doing here, what we do within schools. And then we have our next, as we go above, as we kind of go up this, is we have Project Rewind. Is anyone familiar with Project Rewind? So this is an awesome program that when students, we've used it as a diversion program before, but we also just have families, when their child is struggling with substance use. This is a program that's awesome. It's a 2-hour online educational portion, and then a 2-hour in-person portion out on our campus. And in the in-person portion of it, we really talk about strengthening the family, the communication, having those conversations, and kind of allowing to start that conversation and start that. I know it can be really hard, especially with our teenagers, to just, where do we start? How do we break it down? And sometimes having someone come and facilitate that conversation is a little bit helpful. And also there's a bunch of other families in there. So you're not alone in the experience. It's beautiful. I feel like every time one of us goes and we're like crying at the end of it, at least I was crying, because it's just really awesome and focuses on strengthening the family. We have the family navigation, which is, you know, like are unsure like what next steps are, where to go. We will connect with you and have those. And that's kind of like falling in our tier 2, in which we have parent coaching, peer support, and peer support kind of lives right in the top of early, like our tier 2 before treatment. It's not necessarily therapy, but this is a peer support specialist who has lived experience, who's not a licensed professional, but they have that certification. And what they basically do is, I kind of like to think of it as like a mentor of walking through maybe some of the things that they are going through. And this also is really helpful if you're unsure if therapy is the route that you want to go. And it's scary as a teenager to be like, therapy, like, what's that? And then they like meet their peer support specialist, and being able to break those walls down for them to connect them with a clinician. And then we have our tier 3, which is our clinic, which we have individual counseling. We have family and individual counseling. We see up to, I believe, 24 is in our, so we go into the young adult as well. And then our last one is our intensive outpatient program. And so we have a variety of services. And if we don't have something that fits your family or fits your student, we have a long list of just partners that we have in the community. And we're not like, go to this website. We're like, call this number. We've already called them. They'll know you're coming. And so on our last slide, if we move to that, our website is notmykid.org. And so you can go on there, or if you want to come get our information after, I will give you my email and we can connect. But on our website, we have contact us and we'll get like a 24-hour turnaround to be able to connect with you on there. And then we do have an Instagram, and on our Instagram, we do have webinars that we post. We have one this Friday at 12 with Partnership to End Addiction on raising resilient kids. And so we post that on our Instagram. If you want to sign up, jump on their webinar. So if you're like doing something, you can have it on in the background or whatever that may be. Sometimes I'm like, oh, does my camera have to be on? But it's a webinar, so your camera doesn't have to be on. You can listen to it. And yeah, we are so appreciative that you guys allowed us to come share some things. If you have any questions, we'll stick around, or if we want to open it up as well. And then we also have this QR code as our survey. If you guys want to participate, that would be very interested in that.
Yeah, and thank you guys so much for taking the time to hear us out. And like Allison said, if you have any questions, we can open it up. I know we have like 3 minutes. Yes.
So, what's the best, starting point for learning the right language to talk to your elementary kids?
Yeah, I mean, I can share an experience that I had. When I was in 3rd grade, there was this new kid came into the classroom, super cool. He became my BFF. I was like, felt really cool too, because I was like the classroom translator. And he only spoke Spanish. So, everything, he was talking to me for everything, and I love to talk. So, one day he goes, hey, put this in your shoe. And I'm 3rd grade. So he told me to put it in my shoe. And, next thing you know, the principal walks in and they're asking him like, hey, we need to check you. We need to check him. He actually had substances, and he had handed me substances. I know that we're talking about like mental health, but just an example, he handed me a little bag. When I hid it, I didn't know what was going on. And that day my mom goes, hey, we need to talk. Just so you know, there's something called drugs going around your school. If you haven't heard of this, I'm going to tell you about this. This is what they look like. She didn't go into detail about like naming things, but she kind of gave me this example of this is what they look like. Don't take any candy from anyone. And if you do, you need to tell your teacher right away. And I always like to, it's not a joke, but it's funny because to this day, I haven't told my mom that I am the one that hid the substances. She worked at that school. So she was there. That's why she knew about that. But to this day, everybody at my presentations knows about the substances, except for my mom. But even when we're talking about mental health, right, it's saying, hey, there are times when you feel really happy, times when you feel really sad, using that type of language so that they understand that there's emotions behind this, right? What are we feeling? And again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. That movie Inside Out has helped me so much with families, especially when they have very little kids. The Inside Out graphics you can print out, and sometimes it's like really easy to say, how are you feeling today? Right? Are you feeling really sad? And kind of going off of what they're feeling in that moment and taking that moment to explain, how can we bounce back from being sad? right? And actually helping them evaluate what the factors are that are making them sad, so that they can identify them themselves and say, hey, if you get really, really sad, we might need to get help. I mean, I hope that that kind of answered your question, but if you want to add anything else to that.
No, I think that's good. I think like the emotion wheel too. I think Inside Out is like an incredible like bouncing board to like start that conversations about emotions. And also like regulating, like if they, you know, a child getting like really, really worked up, like modeling to them, like I go like this because they get down on the level. And like breathe them. Okay, when you feel this way, you get really worked up. Like let's take some breaths. Like let's take a moment and take some breaths, or whatever that may be that works. Like that, I know that my mentor, what her kid does is like, I just need to go sit in my chair and like take a me moment. And he like walks over there and like takes a moment to like re-regulate himself, or if it's to go to their room and what that looks like. I know it can be really hard when they're really, really worked up. I used to nanny and tantrums at like was really hard, but to like model that regulation as well can really help them. When you're feeling sad, like we're gonna do this as well.
Yeah, and even, you know, like it's like giving me more ideas to share with you. Like even in those moments where we see them having big emotions, because it doesn't just go like from being okay to being like super depressed or being super anxious. It's like little things that we start to identify, right? Like, oh, like she keeps worrying about the same thing over and over again. And maybe let's have this conversation. Hey, why are you feeling this way? What's going on? What's causing you to feel this way? And I think that that's one of the best ways, because if we just start saying, hey, there's this thing called anxiety, there's this thing called depression, right? Like approach it how, I guess in a way how my mom approached it, right? Hey, I know that there's substances going over, well, she used different language, but there's this thing called drugs going around your school or your classroom. Let's talk about it. And even starting there. Oh, one more thing to add. I looked at Allison and I don't know why I thought of this. Even co-regulation, right? So many times when we think about our child, whether they're 3 years old, they're 10, they're 12, 20, whatever the age is, we expect them to do things on their own. Like, you need to stop crying, you need to calm down and say, hey, let's take a moment and let's sit down and let's have those breaths. Or hey, let's take a moment and let's think about what happened. I know you're angry. I know you're upset. Let's talk about it, and just giving them that space to really help them calm down as we're calming down and doing the breaths with them.
Kindergarten and I took a little session on art therapy. I don't know how many of you.
Yes.
And if do you girls use that in your program with little ones and even up to 10 or 12?
To my knowledge, we don't do art therapy at notMYkid, but we do have partners that do art therapy in Sand Tray. I don't know if maybe you guys are familiar with this. It's like the coolest thing ever. Normally it's for younger students, and they'll have like little characters, and what they'll use is like, okay, like who does this represent? Like who's your mom? And they'll pick like, I don't know, the angel or whatever, and who's your dad? And they'll pick whatever it may be. And through this is art therapy as well, like through what they kind of describe through different characters and stuff, you can kind of piece together how they feel about certain things as well. And so we definitely do have resources that we can connect. The art therapy, the Sand Tray for littles, I think is like the play therapy is really beneficial. My sister does a lot of that with her horses.
Well, the woman who was doing the seminar was like 2 hours after work. And I'll say, well, how did you get to do it? To bring what in. She said you give them permission. And I keep saying that to myself over and even in preschool. If I saw someone was upset or whatever, I would you can go to any of the offices and just if you want to, you can go and do it. And at different times, it's been amazing. And even like on the playground, if a parent brought a child in who his best friend's dad passed away from the kindergarten. And so I said, well, thank you for sharing it. And I said, why don't you just stay in here with me? I was staying one of the two, right? And then, so he's always been staying by golf. And he started drawing and he did soccer things, soccer band that died. And then another little boy with my back door was open. And he said, oh, what's going on? And I said, well, going to having these drawing. And I said, yes. Oh. They didn't talk, they didn't do anything, they just got there and wrote it on paper. And even with my granddaughter, who was almost 10, she had a girl over for play date. And at the end of the play date, I see they both worked on it. And I had this whole family and then her family. And someone asked about this. And we started saying something, or then I think I asked my granddaughter after this. And I don't know if anything was going on at home, but one of the comments was, so my dad will walk over and myself, whatever, and it's like, I was like, it's like just by asking a little question of something we were arguing about. Yeah, just and kind of tell what you're doing, or if you want to. And it's just amazing the things that come out, and for all ages, maybe even. So
Yeah, so much comes out in those, when you give those opportunities, like that.
yeah, and then if someone's really upset, like redirect and give them their space.
It's a great resource.
Thank
Thank you, ladies, so much. We are so grateful that you were here. So, if you have more questions, I encourage you to reach out. There is in the slides information to contact everybody over here at notMYkid. Please fill out their end of presentation form. It's really helpful for everybody. And again, we really appreciate you all being here. We will see you in January. You get December off. Goodbye. Thank you. So